I'm not sure why I never did a drawing of a burger here before, considering it's the workbook cover. And also, let me know which drawings or exercises you'd like me to do from the book or from either one. And on that note, a big thanks to those of you who supported my books, Pen and Drawing: A Simple Guide and the Pen and Drawing Workbook. The reviews, the messages, the recommendations. Thanks so much. So I'm going to be using two nib sizes, like a fine point and a medium point with a fine liner pen, because their lines are crisp and I love the sharp contrast you can get from them in a consistent line width. But you can virtually use any other inking tool, whether it's a ballpoint pen, a fountain pen, brush pen, any inking tool is fine. I think once you can have some line with variation. And I use a number 2 pencil for the underdrawing. Also, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see the pencil drawing process for my ink rendering videos. That could be for another video. I'm not really a burger guy at all, but they're just so much fun to render in ink because even though it's a relatively simple subject, it has a cool variety of textures, shapes, local value, and just overall visually interesting. Now, even though it's a simple form, it's important to find ways to visualize the structure of the form. So, for example, like you can see here, the bun, I visualize it as like a spherical cap. And, this helps me to, when I'm rendering the surface details or like the sesame seeds, I can still visually follow the underlying contour. I visualize both the cheese and the lettuce in the same way, as basically a convoluted plane. So I would take a flat plane and then I just make it more flexible, and the degree of flexibility would enable me to get something like the cheese, where it's just bending, warping a bit, and the lettuce is just more convoluted. And this enables you to see depth and a predictable three-dimensional form instead of just like confusing spiraling lines. Now I visualize the slices of onions, tomato, or pickles as just squash cylinders. You flatten the cylinder and now you have these disc-like forms, and it's just a matter of distinguishing based on details. Of course, the pickles has the ridges, but essentially they're all based on the same form. And this showcases one of the really cool things about ink drawing and just line drawing in general, that by applying stroke variations, line variations, different directions, and alter our lines, we can make the same form appear differently. And I visualize the burger as a squashed sphere. And this enables me to keep in mind that it's rounded horizontally and vertically, right? And then you just combine it with these bumpy forms to create that superficial texture. So while I'm rendering the surface texture, right, these little bumpy forms, I'm still keeping in mind that it's based or embedded into this core underlying flattened spherical mass. By thinking like this, it not only takes care of the three-dimensional shape, but also how it responds to light. And how you render the textures. And even the bun below is kind of like a spherical shape as well, without the bumps. And then it's just a matter of how you render the textures to kind of distinguish, one form from another. But you can see that they share very similar basic core foundational structures. The basic shapes behind them are pretty much the same. And one thing I'll say again and again, right? Pen and ink is such a dynamic and versatile medium. Like, there's no one way to create any visual effect. You could render this bun with cross-hatching, stipples, scribbles, right? I'm just having fun here. I'm actually freestyling the way I'm rendering it. I'm using these kind of curling hatch marks, all right? So explore different ways of mark making. Find what resonates with your skill level, your comfort, your style, your process, just what you enjoy doing, all right? And I say it all the time in my videos, guys. You should enjoy the process just as much as you enjoy the end product. And you enjoy a medium best, right, when you draw to the strength of the medium you're working with, right? So if you're working with graphite, if you're working with charcoal, you're working with, pastels, whatever the drawing medium is, you draw to the strength of that medium. And with pen and ink, it shines with line work, a variety. You don't have to use cross hatching, right? You don't have to use scribbles. You can experiment and create your own mark making, right? Or something you find that's different. You can use your thumb to create certain marks if you feel like, you can't figure out a way to create textures that resonate with what you're observing. You see, like here, the patty's texture can be tricky, but like I shared with you in my book, once you find the pattern is what's most important. That is what is most responsible for creating that visual effect, that sense of the tactile sensation we experience when we look at something, right? Once you can figure out, and it takes some experimentation, some practice, different mark making and so on. But once you figure out that pattern for that texture, it's just a matter of making adjustments to it so you can convey light and shadow, you can make it follow the form, and then you'll just see that texture come to life. And don't let the details of the drawing intimidate you, right? There's no extraordinary anything here. All the rendering skills and techniques I use here are covered in my book. Same basic fundamental techniques, just a different subject: hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, and the 5-stroke variations. And something I'll point out about local value: differentiating local value is always a tricky challenge with ink, right? But the key is to set a value range for an area and stick to it, right? So, for example, the patty has the deepest value, right? And the cheese has the lightest value. And the other parts are pretty much like variations of middle values, right? So with the cheese, I would use my finest point and apply more spacing. And with the patty, I would use my boldest point and make the marks much tighter. So to the viewer, they would read as something that's inherently light or inherently dark in value. And this is something you have to keep in mind when rendering each part of the burger. So when I'm rendering the cheese, I have to ensure that the lines I use to render the cheese is unique to the cheese. The lines I use to render the lettuce is unique to the lettuce. The lines I use to render the bun, the onions, they're all uniquely different so that each part can have its own unique visual characteristics in terms of lines, local values, textures, and just overall visual characteristics. And then it's just cleaning things up, adding some accents, deepening some shadows, maybe adding some fine details, fine-tuning things a bit, and your drawing is pretty much done. Okay, so I hope you were able to take something from this. It's a really fun exercise to practice your ink rendering skills and get better at drawing textures, distinguishing local values, and just conveying a simple three-dimensional subject that has a lot of visual variety. Thanks so much for watching. Keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next video.